Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven from my home in Israel, Ma'ale Adumim, via Zoom, which is why it looks and sounds a little different than most Temple Talks. Why is this Temple Talk different from all other Temple Talks? Well, that's the reason. Temple Talk in the time of Corona, and it's the 14th of Nisan, Erev Pesach, Passover Eve, the 8th, I believe, of April. And we're coming down to the wire here. And I barely have time to make this recording, and I sure hope that it records properly so I can upload it, because I won't have a second chance. And I was trying to figure out how to do a screen shot. I know there's a way to do it and also record myself so they wouldn't have to look at me. But I didn't succeed, so this is the way it is. It's radio. You really don't need to look at me anyway. You can just listen if it interests you. Yes, the 14th of Nisan. And last night we did our bdikat chametz. We checked for the last bits of chametz that might remain in our house. Actually, it's a sort of a symbolic ceremony that we do each year with a special blessing after we've already gotten rid of all of our chametz and cleaned the house and got it all ready for Passover, which is a weeks-long process, which hasn't been made any easier by the coronavirus and the fact that we've been ordered to stay close to home. And in fact, this Passover night, we have been ordered by the government to not leave our houses. They are concerned that people, despite all the precautions being taken and all the edicts already having been passed out in terms of not going from town to town, not going to this and this, they're still concerned that people pass overnight. You want to get together, you'll go outside, you'll meet with some friends, family, and of course, everybody's afraid that that could spread the contagion of the coronavirus. Nobody wants that, and so we've gotten special orders that even after or during the Passover Seder tonight, we cannot leave the house, nor can we leave tomorrow. And there's also a seger, closure. We're not allowed to travel from city to city for the next few days. Again, it's all for the sake of trying to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. And of course, they've taken all these precautions now because it's Passover, and Passover, you get together with friends and family, you have big meals together, you go to the Beit Knesset, the synagogue, each day. And during the intermediary days, many people travel, they go to national parks, they go to museums, they go to all sorts of things for the kids, and nobody's allowed to do that this year. So yes, it's going to be a very, very different Passover this year. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot. What is different about this night and all other nights? Well, we can say that about the entire 7 days of Passover this year. So last night, as I started to say, and this is all off cuff here, I haven't had a chance to prepare for this radio broadcast, but I so much want to share it and get it up there because I think it's very important that we maintain contact as we are quickly and rapidly approaching Passover. So last night we did our bdikat chametz, our final check that we have no chametz left in the house. Now we leave a little bit so that we can actually do what's called biur chametz this morning, which is when we destroy that last bit of chametz. Again, it's accompanied with a prayer and certain statements, one of them being that any chametz that might remain somewhere in our house, on our property, after we've spent the last few weeks going through everything and making sure everything is clean. If, in spite of all that, there are some crumbs somewhere, they should be considered ka'afra da'ara'a, which is Aramaic, meaning that these last crumbs are to us like the dust of the earth. So even if they remain in our house somehow, then they are not considered to be chametz anymore because we just put them out of our mind. We did that this morning. Now, in general, people do their biur chametz. They go to an open place in town near their house and gather, and people bring wood, and you have a little fire, and people come and throw their chametz in and hang around till their chametz is finished and someone else comes. So again, it's another place for social gathering. We were forbidden from doing that this year. We were told instead by rabbis to just either pour some bleach over the chametz to make it inedible, throw it in the garbage, which is what people did this year. I have a backyard, very fortunately, and I kept one little corner of a pita and burned it and said the bracha, the blessing, and the other accompanying kavanot, expressions of intent that we say to accompany the ceremony of the biur chametz, the burning of the last bits of unleavened bread. And now, if it were in the time of the temple, or if the nation of Israel today had it together in order to do a Korban Pesach, a Passover offering, we'd be doing that now, probably beginning to finish up right now, because it's something that you do on the 14th. You would bring your Passover offering to the Holy Temple and bring it up into the courtyard, the inner courtyard of the Holy Temple. Of course, everybody has to be first purified against the impurity of contact with dead body. And that requires the para aduma, the ashes of the red heifer. And the families will go up, or the person bringing the offering would go up, and the Kohanim, the temple priests, would do the shechita, the slaughtering, and taking the blood from the lamb. But this was a requirement that the blood of the lamb be poured against the side of the temple altar. And so they would form basically a bucket brigade, a line of I think 30 Kohanim who would handle. The blood would, with the slaughter, the blood would be poured into this silver or gold bucket called a mizrak, which we have in our museum in the Old City, and which we have photos of on our website, templeinstitute.org. Go to the gallery and you can see photos of these things. And they would hand one from the other till they got to the altar, and then throw it against the altar, and then bring back the empty mizrak for the next lamb. And it was important to keep this blood in motion the entire time, because blood will clot very quickly, and that was forbidden. Anyway, so normally in temple times, this is what you do on the 14th. The 14th actually is a holiday unto itself, Chag Pesach. This is the real Passover holiday. It begins on the 14th. We slaughter the lamb. Everybody is in Jerusalem by now, and everybody eats their lamb in Jerusalem. Anywhere in Jerusalem, you can eat the lamb, but in Jerusalem, you eat it tonight, and you have to finish up by midnight. And that is Chag Pesach. And Chag Pesach is also, beginning tonight, Chag Matzot, the holiday of matzah, the holiday of unleavened bread, which is a 7-day holiday. So really, we have two separate holidays from the Torah, although they are, intertwined and very, very connected. They all have to do with leaving Egypt. They all have to do with that first Seder night in Egypt on the night of the 15th, when all the Israelites were ordered to be in their houses to slaughter the lamb on the 14th, and then take hyssop branches and use that as a paintbrush to paint their doorposts with the blood of the lamb, so that God, as it were, would see that there are good Israelites in those houses, and would not visit them with the death of a firstborn, God forbid, as he did on all the Egyptians. So that is the night of the 15th. And then at midnight, everybody left Egypt for good, for always, for better or for worse. And I just realized right now that I set up a timer so I could time what I'm doing here, but I forgot to put it on. So I'm going to have to kind of wing it from here, and it'll be what it is. So yes, so they'd be getting out of Egypt at midnight. Now we've been instructed this year, ironically, to stay in our houses, and that's this year's way of beating the plague. In any case, whether it's the plague of the firstborn, or whether it's the plague of the coronavirus, COVID-19, or whatever other plague, and there have been many plagues, throughout the centuries. I'm sure everybody's getting a brush-up course on all the different plagues that have plagued humanity over the millennia, because it certainly isn't the first, and it's not the most deadly. In fact, there have been plagues and viruses and things in the 20th century, which were by far much more deadly than this has been. And hopefully, the world will get a handle on this before it goes into the annals of being a top killer, God forbid. But this year, we're told to stay in our house, social distancing, for in order to beat this plague. But whether we stay in our house by orders of their government, or whether we are told to leave our house by orders of God, it's all God. It's all God who is behind everything and is the orchestrator of everything. And it is our trust, our faith in God, in God's loving kindness, which gets us through these plagues. That was the difference between the Israelites and the Egyptians. The Egyptians had their own gods. They had their pharaoh. They had their way of looking at things, and they were on the wrong side of history. The Israelites who dared to slaughter that lamb and dare to paint the blood of the lamb on the doorpost, and dare to eat the lamb and partake in that first Seder, including the bitter herbs and the choroset, which symbolizes the mortar that they used to lay the bricks to build the buildings that they built in Egypt as slaves. All that they did because they trusted Hashem, and that is the quid pro quo. God has faith in us, we have faith in God, and that's what gets us through hard times. And I hope and pray that all of you are healthy, and that we all get through this Passover holiday healthy, and that your loved ones and friends are all healthy, and anybody who is not, we pray for their recovery, and God willing, we'll all get through this together. Passover happens once a year. It's an amazing holiday. You know, we say in our Haggadah. Haggadah is the book that we read from. The story. It's a telling of Passover. It's a telling of leaving Egypt that we read from every year. It's thousands of years old. This what I'm holding up is the Haggadah in English and Hebrew, produced by the Temple Institute, by the way. It's available. And one of the things we say in the Haggadah, and it was written out and fixed thousands of years ago. It's very interesting. It doesn't exactly tell the straight story of leaving Egypt. I'm sorry, I'm moving around. I just got to get more comfortable. It doesn't exactly tell the straight story. There's a lot of different ins and outs and different curves and twists and tangents, and which all encourage us as families, or even if we're alone, God forbid, tonight, because of the obligation to be at home, we can engage with the Haggadah. It's meant to encourage, inspire conversation. And the beautiful aspect of the Passover meal is everyone around the table participating, young and old, those who are very, very knowledgeable, and those who aren't so knowledgeable. And everybody, it says even right here in the Haggadah, it says everybody is obliged to tell the story of the leaving of Egypt on the night of Passover. Even the most learned of us, who they know the story, they know already, they know what's going on. Why repeat it tonight? No, you need to talk about it tonight. In fact, we mention leaving Yetziat Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt, every day in our tefillot and our prayers, morning and night. It is such a basic understanding of who we are as Jews in the world. You know, God created the world, and God brought us out of Egypt. Those are the two things that we say. We make Kiddush, Shabbat, Kiddush, when we sanctify the meal and sanctify the holiday. On the holidays and Shabbat, we always mention God created the world. God brought us out of Egypt, because had God just created the world, well, that's great. But God created the world, and decided to let the world run by itself with no intervention on God's part, with no concern on God's part as to how his creation is doing, how his children are doing, that would be not so great for us. But in fact, God is concerned. God does intervene. God's not always there when we think he should be there. God's not always got the answer that we hope for, pray for, but God's there when God needs to be there, and God has the answer that is the right answer because God is God. And that is the beauty of the contract, the compact, the covenant that we have with God, that we do our part and God does his part, and together we try and work toward perfecting the world, making it a better place. And together we 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 take care of the world the best we can. And God knows that as individuals and as humanity, we can do a lot better. I think the coronavirus is giving us time for some introspection. We call in Hebrew cheshbon nefesh, which literally means an accounting of the soul. We have time to think now. What's all these things that we took for granted, whether they were just luxuries, unnecessary things that we thought were so important, like going to the mall or being able to go on the internet and watch silly videos and other things which really are important, like being able to walk out of our house and walk down the street and not have to count your steps and know that you shouldn't go beyond 100 meters and being able to go out without a mask on so you won't infect or get infected by others. And having to stay 2 meters apart from people and not being able to embrace or shake hands. These are really important things that we also take for granted. And now we have a chance to really reflect and think about what's important, what's less important. Obviously, this holiday evening is going to be very difficult for a lot of people who aren't with loved ones, and it's going to be tough. And we all have to pull through it together. The one thing that we can say is that we're all in it together, and in that regard, we are all together. We're all here, and it's one big Seder. Fact of the matter is that everybody, Jew, non-Jew, today is in Egypt. So what was Egypt? The Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. And Mitzrayim means literally between the straits, a narrow place, a tight spot. It's a word. To this day, it's the word in Hebrew for Egypt. There's a very similar word in Arabic for Egypt. This has always been the word in Hebrew, and it means a narrow place, a tight spot. We might say today, we might say in a jam, in a pickle. And that's Egypt. And let's face it, we're all there today. We're all going to be there tonight at the Seder. And because we're all in a tight spot. We're in a tight spot literally because we're all isolated inside our own homes. And we don't have the usual freedom of movement that we always have. And that's a tight spot. And the other tight spot, of course, is that we are fighting this very deadly virus called Corona, which is seeking to destroy us. So we're in a tight spot. Another interesting thing about the story of the Exodus, Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh in Hebrew, Paro. The word in Hebrew, Paro, Pei Ayin, Pei Resh Ayin, from the word Ba'athriya, which means to disturb, to make it chaotic, to cause anarchy. Pharaoh was causing anarchy in God's world by enslaving the Hebrews, because that wasn't the way it goes. And Pharaoh was making anarchy on his own people by refusing to let the Hebrews go. Let my people go? No. 10 times no. So Pharaoh was a creator of chaos, a practitioner of anarchy, and he was king. And of course, a king has a crown. What's another word for crown? Corona. Corona in our lives today is Pharaoh. He's the one oppressing us. He's the one enslaving us. He's the one creating havoc in the world. So here we are, getting ready for Passover, getting ready to sit down together or alone at our Passover Seder table tonight and to relive, to recount the story of our exodus from Egypt, because we are instructed by the Haggadah to regard ourselves as having been in Egypt, to regard ourselves as on the way to liberation. And this particular, sorry for moving around, this particular instruction actually comes from Torah itself. Again, I haven't had time to really prepare and find the verses in the Torah, but the Torah itself states very explicitly, you will tell your children how you left Egypt. That is one of the takeaways from that first Passover. You're going to tell your children how you left Egypt for all generations, meaning Passover night, Seder night. This is the fulfillment of that commandment, the Haggadah, the story of leaving Egypt, and we are compelled, they are commanded to regard ourselves as having been in Egypt. So for many of us, I think that's going to be easier than usual tonight, because fact of the matter is, we're in Egypt now. We're in Egypt. Not a pleasant experience, this coronavirus. The only thing we have going for us is A, we've been there before. So we've been in Egypt and we know the outcome. And B, the most important thing that we have, that the first generation in Egypt have, that we've had every generation, is our trust and our faith in God. We know that God will deliver us as he delivered us from Egypt, brought us to safety and to freedom, and God will do that today as well, deliver us from the corona. Whether, we're all hoping for a cure. Some scientist will come up with a cure. We're all hoping that vaccine will be discovered and the coronavirus will become a thing of the past. Legend, lore, just as the slavery in Egypt is a thing of the past. But whether it's a scientist or a doctor or a whoever comes up with a discovery that will inoculate us from this deadly virus, we know that, as the Egyptians said, as Pharaoh's sorcerers told him, it's the finger of God. It's God behind it all. And God willing, God will grant someone with the inspiration, with the wisdom, with the insight, with the knowledge to find a cure, find a vaccine, and get us through this. In the meantime, leaders around the world are dealing with this as best they can, hopefully. And the one thing that they do know is that it's a contagious disease. So if we keep our distance, we have a chance of containing it before it overcomes too many people and overwhelms our health systems. That's the battle worldwide right now. Kind of tired, working pretty hard these past few weeks. It's always a challenge, a big challenge. Every Passover, getting ready, so much cleaning to do, and so much preparation and food shopping and a lot of stuff. And this year it's been even more challenging. This year there are a lot of challenges. So much of Torah lifestyle is shared, is communal. We go to the synagogue. We go to the mikveh. We pray together. We have meals together. We getting ready for Passover. We're all in the supermarkets. People who need to prepare vessels, you can use certain cooking things that you use all year long. Also for Passover, if you prepare them either by, depending on the type of the vessel, either by putting it in boiling water or by subjecting it to a blowtorch. And this is usually done in open areas. Public, local rabbinical councils, religious councils will set up these areas, and everybody goes who needs to. And you talk. Everybody's together. Everybody's having a good time. Very, very communal this year. We can't do any of those things. So there have been a lot of uh, updates in halacha in terms of what they call hakalot, leniencies, which have been granted this year to many communities who otherwise would be in a real tight situation because they just can't do things the way they're used to doing. Unfortunately, here in Israel, and I know in other areas in the world where there's a concentration of Orthodox Jews, um, there's a lot of corona and there's a lot of death, unfortunately, very, very unfortunate. Many, many tens of rabbis have succumbed to the corona these past few weeks all around the world. Some people are critical here in Israel, saying, oh, they weren't following instructions of the health ministry of the government. They weren't keeping their distance. I got to tell you something. Many here in Israel, at least many ultra-Orthodox, Haredim in Hebrew, ultra-Orthodox is another English word for it. They're not so connected to the internet. They're not so connected to social media. So the word got to them a little bit later. It took a little longer. And that little bit of time was crucial. It's very unfortunate that that word didn't get out sooner. Some of the rabbis were a little bit slow in responding and telling their people that they have to not go to synagogue. I mean, for thousands of years, times of trouble, you go to the synagogue, you pray together. You you don't isolate. Our strength is in our unity. Our strength is in our numbers, as small as they may be. We get together, we work things out. And now this is very counterintuitive from a Jewish perspective to isolate yourself in order to protect yourself and one another. So it's a big challenge, to really absorb this, to internalize this new mode of behavior, which hopefully will be very, very temporary, and soon we'll be able to go back to our communal lifestyle. But anybody who is critical of the Haredim, of the ultra-Orthodox, saying, "Oh, they were being careless, they weren't taking it seriously," I think he should think twice. I think they took it seriously. It's a difficult, difficult change in behavior for people whose behavior is 100%, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, plugged into a communal lifestyle to then be able to make an immediate about face and separate and continue to do the things, the obligations as Jews each day, but individually, which means basically having to come up with new ways of doing it. It takes a few days, it takes a little bit of time. And unfortunately, that time was very crucial. And um, it's we paid a price for it. So again, we're all in it together. We are Israel. We're one nation, and humanity. You know what? This tells us something. We're all the same. We're all the same flesh and blood. We all got the same infirmities, and we've all are fighting the same battle right now. We all have the same God, and trust in God and look out for one another and look out for ourselves. We'll get through it. Back to Passover. I want to mention a few things. Again, this is all off the top of my head, so if things seem to be a little out of order, a little chaotic, I apologize. I'm doing this as soon as I'm done and I upload this. I got to run back downstairs and continue to help get ready for Seder tonight. We're just a couple of hours away. Tonight, why is tonight different from all other nights? The four questions that usually, traditionally, the youngest person in the family who knows how to read or knows how to recite can say these questions. And they are, just going to read them very quickly. On all other nights, we eat all kinds of herbs, but on this night, only bitter herbs. The bitter herbs represent the bitterness of our experience in Egypt. On all other nights, we do not dip even once, but on this night, twice. Forget the significance of that. On all other nights, we eat either sitting or reclining, but on this night, we eat reclining because on this night, we recline to the left, which is considered to be the posture of free men and women. when they dine. The much of the Passover Haggadah was developed during the time of the Roman era. So I believe that the idea the Romans would recline on their left side, and of course they were the people in charge of much of the world. So they were the symbol of free people. And I read all four. Did I miss one? Uh, trying to see. I think. Oh, obviously, the first question. On all other nights, we eat leavened bread or unleavened bread. Tonight, only unleavened bread. Of course, that's the matzah, and that's because that was the commandment that we got out of Egypt. We didn't have time to allow our bread to rise as we left. We're eating in a hurry. And so, eating the unleavened bread, the matzah, is a remembrance of that experience and a commandment for all time. Throughout the 7 days of the Passover holiday, we not only do not eat unleavened bread, but we don't even see it, don't even possess it in our houses at all. We stay far from it. And in temple times, there was actually another question that was asked, and it was, on all other nights, we eat meat either roasted, boiled, or cooked, but tonight only roasted. Why is that? Because on the Seder night, we ate from the Passover offering, which had to be roasted. That was the commandment, only roasted. Now, a lamb is a pretty small, a lamb is a small animal, and a lamb that's a yearling to a year old is a very small animal. And people would form in those days havurah, this word chaver, which means to a friend, which also means to join. Again, you see that communal aspect. Nothing is more communal than Passover, where we would form these chavurot, these associations for the eating of the Passover lamb and for the conducting of the Seder together as a group. And of course, everybody was doing this in Jerusalem. So yeah, there's nothing more communal than a pilgrimage festival to Jerusalem and and uh, and performing the Passover offering. And so you might have 30 people more in a chavurah. And the lamb is a small animal. You were just required to eat what's called, I think it was a kazayit, the size of an olive, which is a specific measurement, not necessarily the size of a common olive. And and say, so you might be hungry. So there's other animals or other offerings that you could also have other meat and things, but everything had to be roasted. And again, by midnight, the Passover offering, the Korban Pesach, had to be finished. Anything that was left over had to be destroyed. So it was an exciting time. Today we maintain that because there's so much preparation to do, get ready for Passover, and because we're so busy getting ready. In those days, much of the preparation and much of the getting ready had to do with the Pesach, the Korban Pesach itself. And I imagine that first of all, most people were eating you went to Jerusalem. And so your own house, you would clean up and leave it. I don't imagine that they had all the products that we have today, all the food items that have chametz, that have some semblance of leavened product in it, or potentially leavened product. And there's so many things that we eat during the year we cannot eat on Passover because we might even not realize it, but it has some form of leaven in it. So I assume that 2,000 plus years ago, the main effort was involved in getting that, you had to get an oven ready to prepare your Passover offering. You had to bring your lamb up to the Temple Mount. You had to have it slaughtered. You have to bring it back down. You have to put it on a spit and put it in the oven and let it roast. And so by the time you sat down, you're probably pretty exhausted, just like today in our time when we sit down, we're all pretty exhausted. And the Haggadah is the first thing we do before we have the meal. Throughout the Haggadah, we taste a few times. We have wine, 4 cups of wine. We also um, uh, display the matzah, but don't eat any until we actually begin the meal. And we do have bitter herbs, and we do have uh, some other things throughout the telling the Haggadah of the leaving Egypt. So by the time we actually wash our hands and make a motzi, break bread, in this case it's unleavened bread, we're pretty exhausted and pretty hungry at the same time. And then when we finish the meal, we do the blessing at the end of the meal, plus the Hallel, uh, a lot of praises, and sing songs. And of course, there's the hiding of the apikomen, which is a piece of matzah, which represents the Passover offering, a lamb. And traditionally, the children will search for it. The head of the father, the person leading the Seder, will hide it somewhere in the house, and people look for it. And when it's found, we eat that apikomen, the final bit of matzah, which represents the final eating of the Korban Pesach, as we said, it'll be finished by midnight. And that is the conclusion of the meal. And so tonight in the synagogue, Beit Knesset, if we were there, we would also be singing a Hallel, which is a number of songs from Book of Psalms that we sing on holidays and on Rosh Chodesh, on new moons. And we sing the complete version. There's 2 versions. One is a half version, one is a complete version. And on holidays, we always sing the complete version. On new moons, we sing the half version. On Passover, we sing the complete version tonight, the only time it's sung at night, and tomorrow during the day, the morning service. And from then on, the final days of Passover, we only do the half version. And our sages have told us why do we only do the half version? Because God loves to hear our praise and our thanks. But the fact of the matter is that when we left Egypt and crossed the Sea of Reeds, which takes place on the final day, the 7th day of Passover, which is also a holiday, that many Egyptians died, and they're also God's children, they're also God's creation. So our praise and our thanks is somewhat muted in order to take note out of respect for the fact that lives were lost as we gained our freedom. Also tomorrow, before the Musaf service, which is the additional service after Shacharit, after the morning service in the synagogue, which we say Musaf again on holidays, and on Rosh Chodesh, Musaf represents the additional offering that we made on those days, the offering in the Holy Temple. Tomorrow, before Musaf, we say a few special prayers and change our nusach, change what we say in our daily prayer when we pray for rain. Tomorrow, officially, the rainy season ends because we will no longer pray for rain as we did throughout this winter, in which we were blessed with tremendous amounts of rain, so much rain that the Kinneret, which 2 years ago was perilously low, dangerously low, thanks to 2 strong years of rain, and this year especially an incredible amount of rain. It's full. It's centimeters away from being at its very top level, and it's probably going to get there as more winter snows melt and the rain makes its way into the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. So tomorrow we officially end the rainy season and we begin praying for dew, because dew is what will sustain our crops and our flora throughout the summer months. And of course, the prayer for the rainy season at the beginning and the end is very connected to the calendar of the Holy Temple, because now that we are all in Jerusalem for the holiday, who wants rain? And when in the fall, at the conclusion of the holidays, in Shmini Atzeret, the uh, eighth day following the 7 days of Sukkot, that's when we begin to pray for rain. Uh, but we actually, I should amend what I just said. That's when we begin to mention the blessing of rain, but we don't actually begin to pray for it actively until 2 weeks later. And the reason is we want to give everybody a chance to get home from Jerusalem. In those days, it take up to 2 weeks for people to get back home in the land of Israel or in a nearby diaspora. And we wanted to wait until everybody was safely home before we would pray for rain. For God forbid anybody should be stuck in a torrential rain and be in danger because of that on their way home. Now, you might say, well, how come we stopped praying for rain 2 weeks ago so that people making their way to Jerusalem wouldn't possibly face the danger of rain? Yeah, that's a good question. I can only imagine that two things. One is usually when Passover comes around, the heavy rains are finished in any case. And secondly, I would venture to guess that it was preferable to wait till everybody is congregated together, uh, either in Jerusalem or today in synagogues for the holiday, when we can say the prayer together, um, because that way everybody will be on the same page, and that way saying prayer together has more force. However, this year, of course, the Hallel and the prayer for dew and all our other prayers will be done in isolation in our own homes. I'm very, very blessed. I'm here in my home with my wife and with four of my adult children. Um, and we are going to have a beautiful Passover Seder tonight together and a beautiful holiday together. And we'll do what we have to do to get through it. But as I was saying, tomorrow night, not tonight, tonight's the Seder night, but the night following the Seder, the 16th of Nisan, we begin the counting of the Omer. Counting of the Omer is another commandment in Torah. It's mentioned, I think, in the book of Leviticus, Vayikra. And that's when we begin to count. We begin the harvest of the Omer. The Omer is actually a measure, and it's a measure of barley. And the barley harvest begins in Jerusalem on the 16th. And what happens traditionally in the time of the Holy Temple is that the barley would be harvested first in a field in Jerusalem or adjacent to Jerusalem and brought to the Holy Temple, where the Kohanim would grind it up and crush it and make an offering. It would be tossed onto the altar, into the fire. And that would be the Omer offering. And from that point on, the Omer season was initially, the barley season was initially inaugurated, and people could begin to purchase barley grain in the markets. And again, you might say, well, that's so interesting. Seems that we kind of do a purge on grain during Passover, but no, it's not leavened. The grain itself is not a forbidden product, forbidden entity on Passover. It's the leavening or the potential for it to become leavened. But in the time of the Holy Temple, this was the beginning of the barley season. And the barley season began, and we begin to count. And we count 49 days of the counting of the Omer. And the day after the 49th day is the holiday of Shavuot. So 50 days after leaving Egypt, we arrived, or we had arrived 3 days earlier or sometime earlier at Mount Sinai, but on the 50th day was when we received Torah, and this liberation process which began when we left Egypt and physically moved out of Egypt and progressed when we crossed the Sea of Reeds on the seventh day after leaving Egypt, which is the seventh day of Passover. And put an end to the threat of the Egyptians coming after us. And then we were really physically liberated on our own in the desert. But really, truly, it wasn't until we received Torah from God at Mount Sinai that we became completely liberated, spiritually liberated, because now we had a master. Now we had a relationship with the creator of the universe, God, who brought us out of Egypt. And that is the conclusion of this whole process. In the meantime, we begin counting, and each day we count up. The first day is 1 day, and then 2 days, and we count the days and we count the weeks. And we'll be doing that online on our Facebook page each day, beginning tomorrow evening. And I would say this year, it's first of all, it's a very beautiful tradition that we do because it grows on you. You know, the anticipation grows, and you move forward, and you sort of, you have your hand on the reins. You have control of the progression of time, and we know we're heading toward another amazing holiday and heading toward the receiving of Torah. And this year, I would say it's going to be even better because as we draw closer to the receiving of Torah, as we count upward, we're also going to be, God willing, moving a day at a time, 1 day away from this horrible threat of Corona and from the all the ramifications, all the things we've been compelled to do since that Corona became part of our lives, and hopefully sooner or later, maybe during one of these 49 days, the Corona pandemic will begin to ease up and we'll begin to regain some of those freedoms that we have been compelled to sacrifice for the purpose of saving lives. So, counting of the Omer, we count every day, every evening with a blessing. And we count in order, and we must not forget a single evening. If we do, then we actually can continue to count, but without the blessing. And that's a shame. It's a blessing, very beautiful. And again, we count up to 49. And that 50th day is Shavuot. You know, during those 49 days, we also have other holidays here in Israel, which are very important and which I imagine we're going to have to, again, like Passover, conduct in a very unusual manner this year. Because even if we begin to emerge, hopefully soon, from this threat, I'm sure that there are going to still be limitations for some time on movement and the ability to gather together. Because what's coming up, there is Holocaust Memorial Day, which comes soon after Passover is completed. And that also involves many public ceremonies. And after that is Yom HaZikaron, which is Israel Memorial Day for the fallen soldiers in Israel since we've become an independent country in 1948. And that also obviously involves public ceremonies in every town. And the main ceremony in Jerusalem at the Mount Herzl cemetery, military cemetery. And of course, that also will be conducted in a very, very different manner this year. And Yom HaZikaron is followed immediately by Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is Israel Independence Day, which of course is everybody's together. Everybody has barbecues, families are together, friends are together. There's public ceremonies. Again, this year it's going to be all very different. After that is the Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the counting of the Omer, which again, people get together, young people light bonfires, hundreds of thousands of people congregate at the Mount Meron in the Galilee, the place where Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the writer, the author of the Zohar, is buried, and it's become a tradition for people to go there on Lag BaOmer, and hundreds of thousands of people do go there each year. Obviously, this year, it's not going to happen again unless miraculously we emerge very, very quickly from the coronavirus, and actually miraculously there's a proven vaccination or cure for it, which would enable the freedom of movement and freedom of assembly that we have grown so used to. I don't think it's going to happen quite that fast. Let's be realistic. But so there's a lot coming up. This time in Israel is a beautiful, beautiful time of year. It's spring right now. The flowers are blossoming, and the weather is beautiful. Still a little shaky now. Sometimes it's cold. Sometimes it's warm. Sometimes the wind's blowing. Sometimes there's a dust storm. Sometimes we have rain. That's spring here in Israel, but very, very beautiful because of all the rain we've had this year. Things are very green and still very lush. And it's a great time to be outside and a great time for getting together. But again, we're going to have to be outside on our own and not being getting together with a lot of people. We'll do it and we'll get through it. And God willing, all of us around the world will get through this very difficult period. And let's see Passover and all that it means and all that it stands for as an inspiration, an encouragement. We've been through this before, and we'll get through it again. We have an expression here in Israel, Hebrew expression, "Avalnu et Paro, gam na'avo et zeh." We made it through Pharaoh, and we'll make it through this as well. So, getting through hard times has been part of the Jewish tradition for many thousands of years. If you've been around this long and you've made it thousands of years intact, as intact as we are, still one people with our very unique identity, it means we've been through a lot of hard times. And as hard as the times are today, we have many, many blessings today, which we didn't have in the past. But I'm able to talk to you right now via Zoom, and I really hope that this is recording as I planned, so that it's not for naught, because I can't do this again right now. It's a blessing, and many people can be together through Zoom. I'm not plugging Zoom. We have many other blessings today, and we have medical systems that are dealing with the corona, and we have, thank God, many, 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 many dedicated, devoted doctors and nurses and medical professionals and security professionals who are all working night and day for our safety and for our health. And we have to be thankful to all of these people, as well as being thankful to God for all the blessings that we've been blessed with. And you know what? I think my time's about up. I told you I lost track before, but I think it's probably about 45 minutes. I'm going to stick with traditional 46-minute platform as best I can. So I hope you've picked up something from all that I've gone on about these past 46 minutes. And I don't know when I'll be back to our usual format of Temple Talk, but I hope that this format will suffice in the meantime. And I just want to mention before I say goodbye that we also recorded Rav Gedalia Meyer this week with a very, very beautiful message for Passover, for humanity, based on the special Torah reading that we read on the Shabbat of Passover. So I encourage you to listen to his message, which was much shorter than my message here, but very powerful and very uplifting and encouraging, also on YouTube. And again, we also have a very, very beautiful walkthrough, if you will, a tour, if you will, of Passover as it was celebrated during Temple times, fully illustrated on our website, templeinstitute.org. Our new website, which is we're still rebuilding. And if you go to the website and go to the menu, study tools, it drops down and you can go to Passover, and Passover will take you to a very, 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 I think, informative and beautiful description of how Passover was celebrated in temple times. And we'll be in touch with you over the 6 days, or I say 5 days, intermediate days of Passover, because of course on the first day of Passover and the seventh day is a holiday, and we will not be communicating, but in between we will. Also, one other thing which we won't be doing this year, obviously, is the Birkat Kohanim. Usually thousands of Kohanim, thousands of descendants of the temple priests gather together at the Western Wall of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and many, many more thousands come to hear their blessing, which is a very beautiful and provocative ceremony. This year obviously won't be happening. So it's going to be a very stripped down version of everything this year. Anyway, I've really been looking forward to being able to make this broadcast, last minute broadcast, and I've enjoyed it very much, and I hope you have. And I'm wishing everyone, and on behalf of the Temple Institute, wishing everyone a very happy, and you know what? Being happy is also a mitzvah, it's also a commandment to be sameach. Especially on the holidays, it's a commandment to be happy, and it's also a way of inoculating ourselves against disease. We're all stronger when we're happy, so be happy and be healthy, and freedom, freedom, freedom. That's what it's all about. So let's focus on these three things, and we'll get through this all together. And again, I wish and pray for everybody's health, your happiness, and peace of mind. And Chag Sameach. We say in Hebrew, have a happy and kosher Passover, since being kosher for Passover, being kosher is important every day of the year, but Passover is a special challenge and a special commandment. So Chag Sameach, a very, very happy and joy-filled Passover to everyone. Thanks for being with me. Temple Talk.